Kia ora everyone, welcome along to the art of pacing from 5Ks to Ironman to Ultra. Tonight we're going to be looking at a number of things in relation to pacing and how to have a successful event. Whether we're looking at a local park run through to something of a longer, more endurance-based event like Ironman or an Ultra. I'm not going to talk about specifics of a pacing plan for you, but I might touch on the broad concepts of what you should incorporate later on. So, what we're going to cover tonight is why fitness alone doesn't guarantee your best race, the universal pacing mistake, what happens if you go out too hard, how pacing strategy changes from 5K through to the marathon and then into longer triathlon based events, what the first 10% of your race should feel like. And then we'll look at a contrast between effort, power, pace, heart rate, what is going to be the best metric in your circumstances, then how to build strong through the middle and then finish even stronger, training sessions that help develop that pacing, and then finishing with your race day pacing blueprint. So fitness alone is not the sole determinant of your performance. And I'm going to use the example of Jess's Christchurch half last weekend. I hope she doesn't mind me using this as an example. She is in really great shape at the moment. She ran basically a sub 130 at Challenge Wanaka, having biked for 90 Ks and swam prior to it. And then with a solid bit of recovery and then a build up, she'll be disappointed that I only describe it as a underperformance as opposed to a catastrophic event. She did not run to her potential based on some pacing mistakes she made. She started too aggressive, started too strong, and still ran exceptionally well with a 126. Her first opening 9 kilometers were all sub 4 minutes. And then the next 7 off the top of my head were sort of 4 minutes to 4:05. And then she had a drop off of about 30 seconds each to have the final 5Ks significantly slower than any other portion of the event. If she'd been a little bit more conservative at the start, she would have performed exceptionally well relative to her fitness. But as a result of her aggressive start, she underperformed. So you can be in great shape, but still mismanage your pacing effort to get a performance that does not really reflect your true capabilities at the moment. Many athletes race to their fitness for only part of the event. Now, Jess's fitness was able to run that extremely fast initially, but she wasn't able to maintain that for the full half marathon. She only had 5 extra Ks to go to maintain it, but she just physically wasn't able to maintain it for that long. If she had had a more cautious start, she would have been able to pick up and run the last 16 kilometers at that same pace she did the opening 16 or thereabouts if she was getting faster and faster through the event. A smarter approach to the event will allow your fitness to dominate and come to fruition, particularly later in the event, to give you an overall great performance. So as a result, the fittest athlete doesn't always win, although Jess still did win her age group for the national champs. The athlete who executes best often does. Now, Jess's execution I wouldn't describe as poor. It was just less than optimal. She still managed to run better than the second place girl. Universal pacing, going out too hard too early, and the example of Jess that we just discussed is a great example of that. And the reason why she ran way too fast initially is due to her being in the national champs. She was right at the front of the starting corral. She was in with a fast group of athletes, including some of the faster guys, and she just got swept along with adrenaline. She knew she was running too fast. She made conscious efforts to try and back off and slow down, but because she was still running around fast people, she got swept along with their pace and ended up paying for it later. That's the effect of adrenaline. Your legs are nice and fresh at the start of the day. You've got the speakers, the PA system, you've got music blaring at the start, just amping you up, and it just makes you want to run fast. Unfortunately, that will often push you faster too hard and bring in that fatigue earlier than you need it. Those pacing errors can often become major performance letdowns later on in the event. And the longer the event is, the more of an effect that has. Parkrun, start off too fast, it's going to hurt. You can push through. If you start way too fast, you might struggle towards the end, but you're still going to be in a position that you are running. I'm just going to turn my heater off. It's blasting way too hot on my legs. And we've got fresh snow on the hills down here. It's beautiful to see during the day, but it's quite chilly. Um, an example of that would be the Pegasus Park Run that both Jason and I did a few weeks ago. I started way too fast. Jason started a lot more conservatively than me and arguably is in a fitter state than I am. About halfway through, he came up onto my shoulder and I won't say he blew past me. He just went past me and went, toot, toot, like Jason does. And I just couldn't stay with him because my legs had been taxed too much. And he was able to push on and have a fantastic second half of the event. I was able to pick it up in that last kilometre, but I still wasn't able to close on Jason because he picked it up on the last kilometre as well and ran that faster than me. So going too hard early increases fatigue, and then that fatigue shows up later in the event. And Jess experienced that in Christchurch last weekend. If you're disciplined in the opening stages and are conservative with your start, that will give you more options later on in terms of how far out you can push from. And it might be that you don't run to full potential through the middle stages, but you're pushing maybe 85, 90% of your capability, and you're saving that 100% for the last third. And maybe that last kilometre, you're going to push at 105, 110% of your capability and really finish strongly. Pacing changes. The longer the event is, the more conservative you need to be at the start of the event. 5Ks, you can be really aggressive. You can push that pace and you can still pay for it, but you could have, or you can survive a higher level of discomfort for the duration as opposed to trying to sustain it for a half marathon. It's just not going to be achievable. And then extrapolate that out to a marathon. Events like Ironman and Ironman 70.3, pacing needs to be really conservative really early so you can run later. There's no point absolutely maxing out in the swim and the bike to walk the marathon at Ironman. That's not going to be a fun day. And I've seen it where people have had slower run times than what they did the 180k bike in. It's a long walk at Ironman if you have to walk it. That also applies for ultra events, ultra marathons. The longer the event, the more conservative you need to be at the start. A case in point would be if it gets steep, if there are hills in an ultra, particularly early on, walk them. Keep that heart rate right down. Save those legs because they will get fatigued later on. Each distance of event or discipline within an event requires a slightly different approach and a slightly different thought process. The ultra marathon is a lot more relaxed intensity, level 2, even level 1, particularly early on, whereas at 5K, 10K, you're pushing that level 4, maybe even level 5 early in the race. Actually, you're not pushing level 5 early in the race. You're saving yourself at level 4 to push up to level 5 later on in those shorter events. The first 10% of any event, whether a 5K, so the first 500 meters, through to a marathon, ultra marathon, Ironman, etc., that first 10% is just nice and cruisy. Treat it as part of your warm-up. If you are doing it and thinking, this is way too easy, I should be pushing harder, you're at about the right intensity you should be for that point of the event. You need to hold back something on purpose so you've got that something to deliver later on in the event. How do we measure that effort? We can look at a subjective feeling. Ratings of perceived exertion. How hard do you think, or how hard do you feel you are running or cycling or swimming at the moment? Versus absolute metrics like pace or power or heart rate. Now, pace is really good on flat courses. So Christchurch is a great example of that. Hamner in a few weeks, not a good example of that. 400 and something meters of vertical running or altitude gain is going to slow you down significantly. On a windy day, maybe the Wellington Marathon and a half marathon, probably going to be windy. Maybe if you're doing a Waitangi park run this weekend, it might be windy. Those sort of locations, it requires a little bit of modulation in terms of your pace, put a bit more reliance on effort. If you're running or competing somewhere where there's a lot of heat, maybe the Honolulu Marathon, maybe Kona, these sort of places have an effect on your performance. And if it's too hot or too cold, you might need to modulate your effort and drop back on that pace a little bit. Heart rate is another tool that you can use to monitor effort, but be aware that heart rate will often lag behind the actual intensity that you're running at. So if you're picking up the intensity, surging to be competitive, going up a tough hill, all these sort of things will lift heart rate, but it'll lift it in a couple of minutes' time. Depending on how aggressive your change in pace is, will determine how quickly that change in heart rate comes in as well. Also, be aware that hot environments, when you're slightly dehydrated, this has an effect on heart rate as well. Power, particularly for cycling, is an exceptionally valuable tool to manage your effort and intensity, particularly in an event like La Race or Round Taupo, where you're in a bunch. Having a nice low power for a large portion of the event is a great metric to be watching, because you know you're saving yourself for later on. When you get to Turangi and you've got that headwind all the way to Hatapi Hill, the bunches have all split up. You're in a small group needing to work together. You're needing to put in some effort. You can now manage that with power, because you know you've kept plenty in reserve by keeping things nice and easy, nice and low intensity with a high cadence in the bunch prior to that point. One of the best ways for you to subjectively monitor what you're doing is the rating of perceived exertion. How hard am I working? You can back up your feelings with the metrics you've got in front of you, but if you know you're working too hard, there's a good chance you are working too hard. Once you've had that conservative start, through the duration of the event, you can build your pace, you can build your intensity, you can build your effort. You've got less distance, you've got less duration remaining that you need to save and secure that energy for, so you can utilize it early and push on through. I do recommend not surging up to that pace, just building progressively, small steps as you advance through, settle into that pace and be consistent with a slow, gradual increase. If there's other athletes around you that are surging and surging drastically, don't go with them. Stick with your race, stick with your capabilities. Stay relaxed. Self-assess your posture. What's your breathing feeling like? How's your fueling going? Particularly in the longer events, make sure your fueling staying on top of that. Don't ignore it because, oh, I'll just miss this aid station. I'll make sure I get something at the next aid station. If you're pushing the pace and that's the reason you don't want to grab something because you are working hard, it's probably going to become catastrophic later on in terms of a reduction in your performance. Strong finishes always come about because you've started the event with restraint. If you have a great race and have pushed hard from the start, you're still not going to have a strong finish. You're going to survive through and get to that finish, but it's not going to be as strong as it potentially can be. At the end of an event, if you're passing tired athletes late, is both physically and mentally powerful. The opposite applies if you're getting constantly passed. And I can see you're nodding there, Tanya. And I had a good chat to Jess today about that as well. She mentioned the fact that she got passed by plenty of people as she slowed down. It wasn't the end of her race. She still had some very great mindset around pushing forward to the finish line, but it was a point that she did bring up. So some of the key training sessions. Oh, actually, there's Taylor. Taylor had a great Christchurch marathon. She was consistent right from the start, right the way through the entire event, with a wee minor blip during the 19th kilometre. She slowed down just a little bit because she walked through the aid station, grabbed some stuff, but she was within, I think it was 15 seconds for all her K splits, apart from that 19th kilometre. She had pretty much the perfect race for someone going out there and running their first half marathon. She did do Buller, but that was a run walk plan that we'd instigated prior to. So this was her first half marathon where she had the goal of running from start to finish. And man, were her splits perfection. Anyway, progression or training sessions that help prepare you for that. Progressive runs are a real key. Start off, do the bulk of it, maybe half the run at level 2. Step up for the next quarter to level 3, and then finish with a significant portion, maybe 10, 15 minutes at level 4, and then drop back down to level 2 for your cool down for a minimum of 10 minutes. These types of runs are really great at building your effort control as well as your mindset, and know that you can dig deep and tough it out. Negative split sessions are a great way of doing it, particularly on long rides and long runs. Say you're going for a 2-hour run out on a flat route for an hour, turn around and try and run back slightly quicker. If you can get back in 58 minutes, you've done that well. 55 minutes, you've done it exceptionally. Used to have a coach who would give me pace calibration runs, and that was an hour long, 30 minutes out, just jogging, nice low intensity, level 2, and then just turn around and hammer back, running as fast as you can, trying to see how quickly you can get back. And I was running out 6-7 kilometers and coming back those 6-7 kilometers really fast, and your legs know it at the end. You literally curl up into a piece of charcoal and leave sweat all over the lounge floor when you get back. Kitchen floor, kitchen floor, not the lounge, not the carpet. Another great session are interval runs, where the first initial reps are nice and controlled, and you make the conscious effort to build your pace with each and every rep, so you're getting faster and faster and faster through the session. So, how to develop this for race day? Define for yourself, as part of your race planning in the days leading up to the event, what you want the opening section to feel like. Is it going to be your own personal perception of how you want to be feeling at that point? It might be some specific power targets. It might be pace targets if running. It might be heart rate. Set those targets and plan for it. Plan your nutrition and hydration timing around that as well, making sure you're not necessarily fueling for the intensity you're running at there, but the intensity that you'll be running at later. Bearing in mind that the longer you're out on course, the more that fatigue will build up, the more you're going to have to pre-fuel and get that carbohydrate in the system for later on. And Ironman is a great example. You've got the whole bike ride, 180 kilometers of getting fuel in, ready for the marathon. But you still need to keep topping up during the marathon. But running wise, you might not necessarily be able to absorb as much carbohydrate, so you're not going to be in a position to take on as much fuel within the run portion. But if you had some extra fuel that you've consumed during the bike session or the bike section, once you're on that run, dropping back a little bit but still topping it up is going to be of massive benefit. Also, have a look at what your goals are, what you want to achieve out of the event. Are you racing it? And whether you're racing to win, or racing to get a PB, or racing to beat Barry from down the road, your strategy will dictate, or your strategy will be dictated by what your goals are. If you're there for purely recreational reasons, you don't need to be so aggressive with your finish. But you might still want to achieve a certain time, and having that plan in place to help you achieve that. Build in a contingency into your plan. What if it's windy? What if it's hot? What if well, you know the course is hilly, so plan around that hilly portions if that applies for your race course. But also have a little bit of a fudge factor for if something does go wrong. It might be an Ironman or an Ironman 70.3. What will you do? How will you moderate this if you get a puncture? Any questions? Now, I suspect, Tanya, you might have some questions on how to optimize your park run this weekend. Do you mind if I use that as an example on the fly right now? What sort of time would you like to achieve?
Well, I'm assuming it's a reasonably flat course, Gareth. You've done it before, so
Pancake flat.
yeah,
Yeah.
pancake flat. So like Hamilton Lake is pancake flat, which is my usual one. So I don't know, I'd be looking for about 27 minutes.
Okay. So 27 minutes is 5:24 per kilometer.
Yep. So yeah, so
What, what
around
I'd
that.
what I'd recommend the first couple of kilometers
Mm,
stick to 5:30, nice and conservative.
mm-hmm,
The next couple of kilometers, pick that pace up to 5:20, and then for the
mm-hmm.
final kilometer, 5:10 or even quicker. Try and get to 5 minutes if you can.
Ouch. Oh, hell. No, so all of this will require me to warm up rather than using my first K as my warm up, won't it?
Absolutely, it
Yeah.
will. A,
Jason's laughing.
a good 10 minutes jogging
Yeah.
plus some higher intensity, run
Yep.
at level 4 for 60 seconds or so
Yep. I've watched your
with a 30
little
second
video.
rest.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So try that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have that good warm up and then go attack that course. But
Oh,
attack it in the second half by
yep.
having that slightly conservative start. You know,
Okay.
5:24 is what you need to average. 5:30 puts you off by 6 seconds. That's all. And
Yeah.
then you catch that up in the next couple of kilometers. And then that last kilometer, because you haven't taxed yourself fully yet, you can push a little bit harder and then recover
Mhm.
once you cross the finish line.
Yep. So it might be yeah, it might be 27 something. Might be 27 dot dot
No,
30.
26:59.
27.
26:59.
Ooh. We'll see.
And then I'm going to do a park run progress report on it. All right, so we're a little bit out of order for the questions. Tanya's in the middle of my screen, so we'll jump up to Jason.
Yeah, first of all, I can definitely vouch for that warm up and the park run pacing. I've done 2 park runs now, so I'm basically an expert. But definitely does work, Tanya. That story with Jess's half marathon really resonated with me. It sounded exactly the same as mine, except my Ks were a minute slower per K. Um, did exactly the same thing. Got caught up in what was going on around me. Every time I looked at my watch, I sort of said to myself to slow down and then just failed to do it. And really paid for it at the end. Sort of had a drop off of about 30 seconds a K for the last sort of 4 or 5K, which cost me a few minutes at the end. But um, yeah, I think you've sort of touched on what my question was going to be, which is how you incorporate this pacing into your training. Because obviously, a lot of my training has sort of a time-bound long run, and I guess with them not being at race pace, is there still benefit in playing with the pacing a little bit within that level 2, which that those longer runs are set for?
Yeah, so there's a few aspects there. So, firstly, thanks for your feedback on the success of the park run warm up and the strategy involved there. With the fast start and then looking at your watch and then doing nothing about it because you're getting swept along with everyone else running around you. That's very common, particularly at bigger events. If we look at the New Zealand-based bigger events, Christchurch is one of the great ones because you're squashed into the carousel at the start. Wellington's another good example of that, but you spread right across at the stadium. So there's a bit more room and people spread out a little bit easier. But everyone's funneling in to that first, the ramp down onto the road. Auckland's another big run, which is a complete opposite when you're doing a half marathon as part of a team at, say, Challenge Wanaka, where you're starting when your cyclist gets back and they've hopefully got no other cyclists around them to hand over their team runner, and you just get to run at your pace right from the outset. So
Mm.
your ability to control and manipulate your pace and effort is a lot more favorable for you as opposed to a standalone half marathon or marathon where you are influenced subconsciously, usually by the people around you. And it takes a lot of discipline to really back off that pace when you identify that you've gone out too fast. Um, we'll discuss that in a lot more detail when we catch up for your post-race debrief coming
Yeah,
up.
cool.
There was another question at the end there that I should have scribbled a note about. What was the final part there?
In terms of how
Oh, the
is there
training
scope
sessions.
within the
Yeah.
longer zone two training things to do the same sort of
So
pacing and negative splits and that sort of stuff?
the key with any endurance event, whether it's a half marathon, a full marathon, an Ironman, even a 5K is still an endurance event. You're out there for most people, 20 to 30 minutes, some people longer, some racing snakes are a little bit quicker. But even if it's 18 minutes or even 15, you've still got a large proportion of that time operating, a large proportion of your energy is generated aerobically that you're utilizing for your performance. So the key part of these long runs is that they're optimizing your efficiency of your aerobic system, the ability for your body to draw air into the lungs, absorb the oxygen from that air, deliver it to the muscles that are working, and then ship out all the waste products, whether it's taking lactic acid to the liver to get resynthesized, or whether it's taking carbon dioxide to the lungs to get exhaled out and exchanged for fresh oxygen. The more efficient we can make that system, the easier any endurance event is going to be. With pretty much all your long runs, we're finishing with some stride outs towards the end. So it's giving the legs exposure to, hey, we still need to be able to deliver some fitness at the end of these sessions. And so that's the reason why I put those in there. I can't remember if I've used any progressive runs with your running at this point.
Not that I can recall.
Yeah. So often I don't, particularly if people are training in a number of disciplines, particularly if there's both running intervals and cycling intervals within a week. Adding in a progressive run adds a lot of overall training stress by having a big or within, say, a 2 hour run, you might be looking at 60 minutes of level two,
Yep.
stepping up, maybe doing 30 minutes at level three, and then 20 minutes at level four. 20 minutes with no break at level four is intense for anyone, especially if you've had that 30 minutes beforehand at level three and you're already 90 minutes into a run. The only thing you've
Mm.
got left to look forward to is the cool down. The legs
It's the
are
most
fried
important part.
afterwards. And if you've had multiple interval sessions during the week on the bike and running, then there's a good chance I won't be using that as effectively a fourth or maybe fifth session with intensity each week.
Oh, yeah.
Has that covered things for you?
Yeah, 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 that makes sense.
Nice. Gareth, we'll roll round to you, my friend. I can see you're doing concurrent activity. You're male like me, can't multitask, but you can do concurrent activity very well.
That's correct. So now I'll have to just rely on ERG to keep my power correct while I talk. Um, Sorry in advance for any puffing. Um, Firstly, before I have a question, Tanya, the Waitangi Park Run course runs south to north. It's an out and back course, and the most prevailing winds in Wellington are either northerly or southerly. So depending on what the wind is on the day, you're either going to have a headwind or a tailwind, and it'll roughly split 50-50. So be sure to check the wind. and compare that to the course profile, because that's going to affect how you pace it. Hopefully that helps. Right, onto my own question. So the other night I went out into the 5K time trial. I was feeling pretty good. Did a solid 1 kilometer warm up. Was feeling okay. A little bit of a ache in my legs, which is my ongoing issue. But then I kicked off into the 5K and I felt amazing. I was flying. I was doing 5:15, 5:30 a K, which is way, way quicker than I would ever have run a 5K. But I felt great. And then everything collapsed all at once. It wasn't really my breathing, actually. It was my legs that went first. So I know that I went out way too fast and I didn't pace it really well. My question, I guess, is I couldn't read it at the time. I was breathing perfectly fine. I had the cardio to sustain the pace. And it basically ended up being a leg overload that got me and forced me to slow down very suddenly. But then, when that happened, my breathing went out the window. So I guess my question is, even though I've got the cardio capacity to run at that pace, why, when my legs started burning, did my cardio go out the window?
So the burning feeling comes down to lactic acid. So you're above threshold, and that's when I say threshold, you're above the point where your body is producing more lactic acid at a rate faster than it can clear it. If you stay below that threshold and your body can clear the lactic acid quicker than what it's producing it, it'll keep producing it, but you'll keep clearing it. And it has a net effect of basically zero. Once you get above what's a measurement of 4 millimolar per litre of blood, that's roughly the point where the body can no longer keep up with clearing that lactic acid. So as that lactic acid accumulates, you might be clearing 4 millimolar, but if you're producing 4.5, 5 millimolar, then you're starting to accumulate half for millimolar, 1.5, 2, it starts building up. And that's what causes the drastic slowdown. So the burning sensation you're feeling is that lactic acid. You also, as a result of that, to clear it, you're going into what's referred to as oxygen debt. So you need to keep breathing, which we want to do anyway, but you need to keep breathing at a rate that gets in enough oxygen. So you're now using energy aerobically, using that aerobic system as opposed to the lactic acid system to create that energy. Once that oxygen debt has been paid back and your lactic acid levels have come back down again, you'll find you'll be able up that pace again slightly, especially if you know the end is near. So case in point, using the Pegasus Park Run, not necessarily Jason's example, but my example, I went out way too hot. The lactic acid was burning. It caught up with me about the same time Jason caught up with me, and I just was not able to go forward at the same rate Jason was to keep up with him because I was in the same situation to what you just described, Gareth. After a K and a bit of slightly slower running, getting that lactic acid level down, I was in a position where I was able to pick up the pace for that final kilometre, knowing full well that once I crossed that finish line, I just needed to keep breathing and not put that strain or not run at an intensity which is creating lactic acid. I don't run, don't even walk, apart from short steps, not very far, not very fast. And that lactic acid will eventually clear out, catch my breath, and then I'm fresh enough to go for a cool down and do another lap or so of the lake.
Thanks. Makes sense. I just couldn't quite, because while my legs were burning, what I found is I was still puffing really heavily and I just couldn't catch my breath and I couldn't work out what was going on physiologically there because I wasn't
Yeah.
puffing like that when I was actually running fast.
Yep, because the predominant energy system, it's an anaerobic or an energy system without oxygen. You're still breathing, you're still providing some oxygen, but the bulk of the energy, 80%, I'm just plucking some numbers here because I don't know exactly what intensity you're running at. And even if I did, it's not necessarily going to be a easy formula to work out what the proportion was. But say it was 80% anaerobic, 80% of that energy is being created from the alactic energy system, and 20% is coming from the aerobic system. You don't need to breathe too much to provide that 20% of energy.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
All right, so we'll go around the room a second time. Tanya, anything else from you?
Yeah. Can it be something unrelated to this?
Absolutely, it can.
Oh, cool.
Any topic.
Yeah. No, how do you knit a jersey? No, I'm only kidding.
I had to put you onto my mother-in-law for that one.
Yeah, sorry, I'm only kidding. So I did your 20-minute stretching regime today. So,
Yep.
and I was really
Thanks for the
sore.
feedback you gave me.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was really sore. It was a great routine actually, but really sore from the run that I did yesterday, the Waitomo Trail run, which took me nearly 5 hours to do a half marathon because it was so muddy. So sore. So like how hard do you like? I mean, is it good to do stretching when you're like really sore, or do you wait a couple of days, or do you just do some stretching as much as you can and kind of ease yourself into it? Yeah, like I felt
So,
so
ju-
tight, it felt like I was barely even stretching anything.
when you're so tight, a small stretch can work wonders at helping release things.
Yeah.
Treat it like massage. After a tough event, the last thing you want is a deep tissue, very thorough, very strong massage.
Mm.
You want a light flush
Flush.
out massage.
Yeah. Yep.
So you want a light stretching session. So
Yeah.
don't try and
Okay.
put heaps of pressure on yourself. Don't try and stretch and contort yourself into the most extreme of yoga poses. Just a collection of light stretches. It might be that you do the 20-minute stretch session again 2 weeks'
Yeah.
time when you're not so fatigued or tight post
Mm.
race, and you use exactly the same stretches, exactly the same duration. You just take those stretches further. Don't
Yeah.
push
Okay.
yourself. You don't want any pain when doing the stretches, particularly straight after an event.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Jason, background to you, my friend. Background to you, Gareth.
Sorry, no questions other than I'm riding the Arthur's Pass ride at the moment, and I wanted to know how awesome did it feel coasting past that truck?
I'd forgotten I'd overtaken a truck on that downhill.
I was watching that guy. That looks like a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that was good. He gave me plenty of room as well. He had overtaken me on the climb up, and yeah, he was a professional driver. He moved over, gave me plenty of room, and I just zipped past, gave him a wave, and then when I turned around, which you'll see in the video coming up, once I turn around, I'll go. Well, actually, no, you probably don't see it, but I gave him a big wave, and he gave me a big wave back. So yeah, always a lot of fun overtaking vehicles, especially on a sweet downhill like that. And for those that know the road, it wasn't on the viaduct. Yeah, I have a level of self-preservation. I wasn't overtaking on that.
Last I checked, your name wasn't Tom Pidcock.
No, definitely not. I'll just open it up if anyone else has any other final comments. If not, we will wrap things up. Thanks for joining us tonight. Ka kite anō. Feel free to unmute, and if you've got anything, I'll happily answer them.
Thanks, Ray.
You're welcome, Tanya.
Yeah, cheers, Ray. I was more concerned at the fact that you were giving a truck driver a wave while heading down the viaduct. Riding down there one-handed was quite impressive, but I'm glad you clarified.
Yes, friendly wave, not a salute that some motorists give cyclists.
Oh no, it was more you could get your hand off the bars.
Don't need them on the handlebars to apply the brakes because I'm not applying the brakes.
That's the spirit.
Cool. All right. Ka
Cheers,
kite.
Ray.
See ya.
See you all.
See you Tuesday.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes,
Bye.
we'll do.
Bye.
Bye.
Tuesday morning and then Tuesday morning again.